All right, you guys, today we're going to be talking about Renaissance architecture. So look what brilliance and innovation can do. So Renaissance architecture was a style of architecture that kind of reflected on the rebirth of classical culture. That's been a theme through this entire thing. I can promise you, I'm going to ask you about the rebirth of classical culture and what does that mean? So make sure and put that in your notes for the final. But it's bringing back of Greek and Roman ideas and philosophies and artwork. Okay, so remember that. Anyway, it started in Florence in the early 15th century and kind of spread throughout Europe, which replaced the medieval Gothic style of architecture. The revival of ancient Roman forms, including columns and round arches, tunnel vault, and the dome. So the basic design element was order, and knowledge of classical architecture came from the ruins of the ancient buildings that they saw all around Italy, and also the writings of Vitruvius. We mentioned Vitruvius with Leonardo da Vinci. Remember, he drew this background picture, the Vitruvian Man, Vitruvius. See, all comes full circle. So, as in the classical period, proportion was a really important factor of beauty, and Renaissance architects found a harmony between human proportions and buildings. The concern for proportion resulted in clear, easily comprehended space and mass, which really distinguishes the Renaissance style from the more complex Gothic style. Filippo Brunelleschi is considered the first Renaissance architect. And Leon Battista Alberti's 10 books on architecture, which were inspired by Vitruvius, became a Bible of Renaissance architecture. Okay, so everybody looked at these books by Alberti, and we'll talk a little bit about both of them. But first, let's talk about Brunelleschi, right? He was an architect and an engineer, and he was one of the early pioneers of the early Renaissance architecture. His biggest, most major work is the Cathedral de Santa Maria del Fiore, which is also referred to as the Duomo. And that's in Florence. I've already showed you pictures of it twice, right? And that was built by Brunelleschi from like 1420 to 1436. So Brunelleschi actually invented machines that worked on this project. And early in his architectural career, he rediscovered the principles of linear perspective. So when we look at some of the other Renaissance artists, so remember the School of Athens painting with all the ancient Greek and Roman philosophers that used linear perspective in there? Brunelleschi kind of started that. So let's talk about Il Duomo, or the Florence Cathedral, or Cathedral de Santa Maria del Fiore, right? So all three of those are the same building. And it's this one here that we see. And this dome that you're looking at is the only part of the cathedral that Brunelleschi is actually really responsible for. And so the El Duomo, and Duomo actually means cathedral in Italian. It doesn't mean dome. Don't ask me why. But I always thought it meant the dome, but it doesn't. It means the cathedral. But El Duomo is the cathedral. So it's a staggering construction whose pink, white, and green marble facade and graceful campanile. So the campanile is the bell tower. They dominate the Renaissance cityscape. The project started in 1296, but construction took 150 years and wasn't consecrated until 1436. So another work, less famous, but still really beautiful and exceptional, by Brunelleschi is the Church of Santo Spirito. It is a perfect Renaissance architectural harmony example. It has got the columns, it's got the arches, I mean, it's just picturesque. It was designed by Brunelleschi. He started the designs for the church in about 1428, and he followed a very strict geometrical plan in order to design the perfection of forms plus proportions. So that was really, really important to him, just as it was really important to the Greeks. Any of you took Greek art history last time. So the first pillars in the church were delivered in 1446. So this take a while, and 10 days before he died, unfortunately. So after he died, the works were continued by his followers, but he's still given credit for the design. Another space by Brunelleschi is the Pazzi Chapel. It was designed and built by Brunelleschi as a perfect space with harmonious proportions. He achieved that by including in this project knowledge that he gained while he was staying in Rome, when he was primarily focusing on measuring ancient buildings. So he traveled to Rome. It was like traveling along with his Renaissance tape measure. I don't even know what that would have looked like or what they measured with, but he traveled and went and just spent his whole time measuring ancient ruins and ancient buildings from Greece and Rome. So it's actually pretty cool. The next guy I want to talk to you about is Donato Bramante. He lived from 1444 to 1514. His most famous project was the design for the new St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, even though he never got to see it finished. He did die before it was done. He designed the Tempietto of San Pietro, a classical-inspired circular temple, and some other places. And Bramante was the one who was the mortal enemy of Michelangelo. So Michelangelo wanted to design St. Peter's Basilica, and Bramante won. And then Bramante convinced the Pope to have him paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling, even though Michelangelo wasn't even really a painter very much. He was mostly an architect and a sculptor. Like, he would have told you he was a sculptor if you talked to him. And so Bramante convinced the Pope to give him the Sistine Chapel ceiling in the hope that he would just completely blow it and give up and not be able to do it, and he would look bad in front of everybody. And then Michelangelo rocked it and did this amazing job. So St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City in Rome is probably the building that he is most famous for. It's neither mother church of the Catholic Church nor a cathedral of the diocese, but it's in Vatican City. So it's regarded as one of the holiest Catholic shrines, and has been described as holding a unique position in the Christian world as the greatest of all churches in Christendom. So here's St. Peter's Basilica, which is just phenomenal. The next structure that we want to talk about, again, is the Tempietto of San Pietro in Rome. And it's a small circular chapel that was built in the courtyard of San Pietro in Rome, which is supposedly the martyrdom site of St. Peter, so where St. Peter died. It was commissioned by Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain and built in 1502. So it was inspired by a particular type of classical temple, specifically by the Temple of Vesta at Tivoli, built on a circular path and surrounded by columns. He added a dome that's been altered since then, and used Doric order columns for the structure's decoration. It's elegant and simple reinterpretation of classical forms. So this is the Temple of Vesta at Tivoli, and this is the ancient Greek structure that was the inspiration for Tempietto. I just thought you might want to see that. There's another picture of Tempietto. The last place we're going to talk about by Bramante is Pavia Cathedral. It's located in Pavia, Italy, and it's the largest city and seat of the Diocese of Pavia. Construction began in the 15th century, and they never got around to putting the marble facade on. So this is what the brick is, the first layer, and then they lay marble over the brick to decorate it. But they never got around to doing the facade on this temple. Although it's still beautiful. I love the hexagonal top. It's just gorgeous. So let's talk about Leon Battista Alberti. Remember when I talked about the 10 books of architecture that were like the Bible for everybody? Leon Battista Alberti was the one who wrote those. He was a humanist, a philosopher, a writer, a Renaissance architect, and an art theorist. And he was known for pursuing political, philosophical, artistic, mathematics, scientific, and athletic endeavors. I mean, you want to talk about a Renaissance man? A Renaissance man is someone who's good at everything. They can paint, they can sculpt, they can be an architect, they can go to the Olympics. So Leon Battista Alberti was really a Renaissance man, good at a lot of things. He was considered by many scholars to be a universal man of learning. So he painted, designed buildings, wrote scientific and artistic and philosophical treatises. He wrote the first book on Italian grammar, did work on cryptography, and like I said, also wrote the 10 books on architecture. He's credited with inventing the cipher wheel. And it was said that from a standing position with his feet together, he could jump over a man's head. So he designed this building called Santa Maria Novella. It was actually designed by two Dominican friars, Fra Sisto Fiorentino and Fra Ristorio de Campi. And work on the basilica continued on commission. And Leon Battista Alberti was asked to create the facade. So just the front part with the different colors of marble is what he designed.